This set of notes is about slavery and the Civil War. We've spent a lot of time talking about the role slavery played in the build-up to the Civil War. And so we're going to take a look in this notes about how slavery also played an important role in changing the outcome of the war and changing the reasons for which it was being fought. As soon as the war began, strong abolitionists put pressure on President Lincoln to end slavery right away. We know from our conversations that Lincoln didn't like slavery, but he said his primary goal was to try to keep the Union together and get the Union back together. So he was a little bit hesitant. Part of the reason he refused is because he did not want to lose those border states, the slave states that had remained in the Union, especially Maryland. If Maryland broke away and joined the South, then the northern capital of Washington, D.C. would be completely surrounded by the Confederacy. So Lincoln was very careful not to antagonize those border states. He also didn't want to look desperate. If he had right away made it about ending slavery, he worried that people in the North would feel like it was a desperate move. And so he wanted to wait for a victory. Early on, the war had not gone terribly well for the North. Lincoln wanted to wait for a victory to announce an end to slavery in the South. So he waited for the Battle of Antietam. Even though the Battle of Antietam wasn't really a victory, it was more of a tie, it was close enough for Lincoln that he felt he could go ahead and announce his major executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation said that on January 1st, 1863, all slaves in areas that were still rebelling against the Union would be set free. So that gave a few months. Those states that were in the South, if they stopped rebelling, then the owners in those states that stopped rebelling would be allowed to keep their slaves. That also meant that slave owners in the border states like Maryland could keep their slaves. So Lincoln hoped that that would keep them happy. Also, slave owners in places that had been conquered by the Union Army and were effectively under Union control were able to keep their slaves. So this only applied to the areas that were in the South rebelling against the Union. And this was supposed to encourage the South to give up, right? That maybe if they went ahead and gave up, they would be able to keep their slaves. And it also gave a boost to the abolitionists in the North and gave the Union Army something that was moral to fight for. It gave them a moral cause, something that they could believe in and feel was right. After hearing the news, some slaves ran away to the Union Army. Some of these fugitives were given paying jobs, cleaning, cooking, doing things like that to help the Army around the camps. After the Emancipation Proclamation, the North also began to recruit African American soldiers to serve in all-black regiments. So that benefited the Army, but there were some not so great parts of that as well. For a long time, they weren't paid the same. Even though they were doing the same jobs, had the same dangers, they were paid less than white soldiers were. And they were often given the jobs that the white soldiers didn't want. Cooking, cleaning, digging trenches, guard duty, things like that the white soldiers didn't really want to do. And if they were captured in battle, they faced incredibly harsh treatment. Still, all-black regiments like the 54th Massachusetts, probably the most famous, proved that African American soldiers were just as capable and just as courageous as white soldiers. They and the almost 180,000 African Americans who ended up fighting for the Union played a major role in helping the North to win the war.